we're going to, in the study of Daniel 11 today, what we're going to try to do is we're going to take it real slow and easy because there's a lot of moving parts. But just as a thing, when somebody says, I don't need to be talking about politics and religion or mix religion and politics, let me just say something. The Bible is all about politics. 100% politics. In every book and in every chapter, there's politics. Yeshua had to deal with them, the politicians of his day. Daniel is dealing at the highest level with the politicians. And Moses dealt with politician and the Pharaoh. Everybody deals with politicians. It's politics is everywhere. It's the whole Bible. So the question is, how do you approach these things without somebody getting their feathers in an uproar and being able to have these discussions? Because quite frankly, everybody has their own ideas. But I will say something specifically about these times. We are running out of time, and we don't have the ability just to be quiet anymore. We have to speak boldly, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this here when we get into this in a few minutes, but we can no longer just sit. We're at the end of the sabbatical year has now ended, and we're full rush into what could be a nuclear war starting imminently, easily. So it's not business as usual. Okay, so since Mom just sat down, we're going to have her read the first 4 verses of Daniel chapter 11.
I don't have it yet, but I'll look it up. Chapter 10, 11?
11.
There's somebody who's prepared, ready to go, right on time.
You're right. What verses?
1 through 4.
Okay, this is the New American Standard. No, this is the New King James. Also, in the first year of Daniel the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia. The 4th shall be far richer than them through his riches. Than them all, by his strength through his riches. He will stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he has risen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of the heavens, but not among his posterity, nor according to his domain with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these.
Okay, so let's remember at the tail end of last chapter, we talked about the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece. So there was really no reason for Persia to ever invade Greece. There's not enough wealth. Not enough farmland. There wasn't really anything other than getting in control of the Mediterranean Sea that they would invade maybe Cyprus or Crete or some of the islands, right? But from a strategic point of view, if you go look at it, there was no reason for him to do it. So we were listening to it was a video from 2015 of this kid named Nathan from Israel, and he basically said that when he had died and then went up into the heavenly realm, or he went into the other realm, and he says there is not a bump on the earth that does not happen without God knowing it. Nothing, 0. There is nothing that not a scratch on your body happens without God knowing it, allowing it to happen. So when we look at this, we're going to talk about the kings of the north and the kings of the south. And in it, why don't the other generals fight among each other? Why is the fight just over this area? It's because God is willing these things to happen. He's putting the things in motion for these principalities, these princes of Greece and Persia to fight each other. Mom, can you mute out for a second?
Are you hearing me?
Way too loud. Yes. Thank you. All right. So in verse 2, the king they are talking about, does anybody know who that king is?
No.
Have you seen the movie 300?
No.
All right. Who's the king in the movie 300 from Persia?
I think it was Darius was the one that got killed, and then Xerxes came after that.
Xerxes.
I think.
Xerxes is he's the one who began to desire to go to take Greece. And there's a lot of reasons that personal reasons on his part that he wanted to do it, but that's where it began, was King Xerxes. And after he invades, it's what started the domino effect for Alexander the Great, who basically wanted vengeance after that. And he began he began his design to go after Persia. And when he conquered Persia, he wasn't done yet. He went after Egypt. He went after the Indus Valley up into, the Indian tribes. And so he continued to set his sights for a lot of things. And so when all that's said and done, we find in verse 4 that that Alexander the Great, he divided up his kingdom, or his kingdom was divided up among 4 generals. Okay. Those generals' names were Ptolemy, Antigonus, Cassander, and Seleucus. I may pronounce them wrong. So Ptolemy basically got Egypt and North Africa. He's the Ptolemy dynasty will be the kings of the south, will come from the Ptolemy dynasty. Antigonus, he got Thrace and Asia Minor. So that would be modern day Turkey and parts of Bulgaria. That would be what he would have today. And then you have Cassander, who got Macedonia and Greece. So from Sparta all the way up to the north of Macedonia, to the Carpathian Mountains, he got that area. And we see those 2 generals never fought each other. There was some small skirmishes, but they pretty much stayed in control of their areas and never ventured out. And there was no geopolitics really to speak of that affected them. But the one Seleucus Nicator, he was given Syria and Babylonia. This is the dynasty that caused the most trouble, and it's from this dynasty that we're gonna find out about the kings of the north. So when you think kings of the north, kings of the south, it's the Seleucid dynasties in the north and the Ptolemies in the south. Okay, that's who we're going to be speaking of in the next few verses. Okay, so verses 5 through 39 are about the fights between these 2 people. Okay. So Matt, can you read verse 5 and 6? And we're going to take this very slow as we go through here.
Okay, verse 5, it says, "Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure, but she shall be given up, and her attendants who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times."
Okay. You guys know this. I don't have to probably say this, but in the ancient times, if you wanted to have peace between 2 dynasties, if you wanted to keep 2 major nations from going to war with each other, let's just take an example of Ukraine and Russia. If Ukraine and Russia wanted to make peace, then Putin's daughter would marry the son of what's the puppet king they have in Ukraine? What's his name? Zelensky, right? So his son would marry Putin's daughter, and that would keep them from going to war. Okay. Now, in this case, it backfires. So let me give you some of the backstory of verse 5 and 6. Ptolemy the First, also known as Soter, son of Lagos, he had ambitions beyond his border. So just a second. He had ambitions beyond his border. So he started moving north up to Gaza, and heading up to the Judean hills. When he did this triggered some things, because the border between Antioch, okay, which is basically Damascus area, and Egypt, Gaza, that area which is now we call Judea and in Samaria, that area, it wasn't really settled who controlled it. So when they divided up it was loose. So the area of Phoenicia, the area of Gaza down to where the Philistines were in Judea would have fallen under Seleucids. But Ptolemy saw that was unfair. So Ptolemy the first attempted to try to move north. In the process, it triggered a fight between the two dynasties. Okay. The agreement was proposed a peace treaty that called for Antiochus II to marry Bernice, the daughter of Ptolemy II. So this is second in line in the dynasty. Now, there was a problem. Antiochus was married, and he was married to a lady named Laodice. And she wasn't too happy with the marriage, but it accomplished for a short time. It accomplished what they wanted. There was peace between the two dynasties, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids stopped their war. But internally, okay, Bernice has an offspring, a child, okay? And through treachery, Laodice, she basically kills Bernice and the child, and eventually her husband's killed as a result of all of this. Okay, there's a major attempt at the throne here, and she basically controls the throne for a short period of time. Okay, and it's all the result of this marriage to try to bring these two nations together. And so let's go into scripture. If we go back in time, remember when Aaron and Miriam are arguing with Moses over one of his wives?
Right.
Okay. Well, that wife was a Cushite wife that he had married to make it. Josephus tells us that there was a peace treaty between Egypt and Cush in one of their wars. And when he married one of the princess of the Cushites. Okay. We're not told anything of whether they had children or not. We're just knowing that they got married. And so in Aaron's eyes and Miriam's eyes, she should have been put away because his wife that produced children for him was, as we know, Zipporah, right? So this is not the first time at a high level these things are done, and inside the royal house, if you will, not everybody's in agreement with this whole thing. And we can go on to King Saul giving his daughter to David, and Michelle causing problems in that royal house. And we see these things happening in many other times. But the physical act of marrying somebody to another king to make a peace treaty is the reason why they do it. But not everybody's happy with what happened. Okay. So if we go back down to verse 7, Paul, will you read verse 7 and 8?
But another shoot from her roots will arise in his place. He will come against the army of the king of the north and enter his fortress. He will fight against them and prevail. He will also carry off their gods into captivity to Egypt, along with the metal images and their precious articles of silver and gold. For a few years he will stay away from the king of the north.
Verse 9.
Verse 9. Then the king of the north will invade the realm of the king of the south, but he will retreat to his own. His sons will prepare for war and assemble like great army.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so here we read in verse 7, we have Ptolemy the third. This is the king of the south, also known, his real name is Euergetes, organized an expeditionary force against Syria in order to avenge his sister's death. Remember, Bernice was his sister.
Oh.
Because she was killed by Laodice, he's furious. He wants revenge, and he wants to settle this, right? And so this war that went between the two kings, the kings of the north and south, went from 246 to 241. So roughly about 5 years, this war went on and on. Okay. Finally, when it came to a stalemate, what happened? He returns to Egypt with a spoil. a lot of gold and a lot of silver he basically brings back, which was enough to settle the war for him. Okay. He succeeded on other fronts as well as and also that same king went out and conquered Cyrene, which is in Libya, and he brought that under their dynasty. So he was taken over the North Africa and parts of Gaza became under this Ptolemaic dynasty. Now, why is that important? Because even though there's a stalemate, and even though they went back to it basically shows there's things bubbling up with these two things, and there's vengeance on both sides, and they're not going to let this thing go. It just won't go away. It's going to stay, and it will stay for over 100 years. Okay. So let's go back to verse 10. Okay, I'm going to read this 10 through 13. Now, his sons shall wage war. So you see it's a progressive between dynasty to dynasty. His sons shall wage war and assemble a multitude of a great force, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass through, and again shall carry the war as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south, moved with rage, shall come out to fight against the king of the north, and he shall raise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. For the kings of the north shall again raise a multitude, or another army. Some of your translations may just say an army, right? Is that what does yours say? Shall raise a multitude or an army?
Mine just says another army of greater than the first.
Yeah, I don't know why they translated that, but it sounds better. He raised a larger army, greater than the first, and after some years, he shall come on with a great army and abundant of supplies. So, in the ancient world, when you're going to go to war, there's a lot of things that go involved in this. One, you had to have the logistics to do so. You had to be able to pay the soldiers. You had to hire mercenaries to help, and you had to get auxiliaries from other nations, right? And so once you had your army set, the campaign could last, for 2 or 3 years. And so when they set out to do this, there was a back and forth. The other may take the fight. This is what's happening in Ukraine. Russia raises money through their oil, right? And they attack Ukraine. Ukraine takes the brunt of the fight, and then they are able to raise money through outside forces to offset the fight. And it's in a stalemate. It's a back and forth going on. Well, the kings in the north and the kings in the south are doing the same thing. So when you get into verse 10 through 12, Antiochus III is the one who launched an expedition against Phoenicia and Palestine. So what does that mean? This is contested area. The Lebanon and the coast of Israel today was still contested, where Ptolemy laid claim to it, and the Seleucid Empire wanted to take away those ports, because this is valuable ports for them. Because if they don't control those waterways, then they can't get their navy out. Okay, so he does an expedition against Phoenician Palace. This is in 219 and 218, a 2-year war that ended in a serious setback at the Battle of Raphia, where he was soundly beaten by a smaller army from Ptolemy IV. Now, this is the fourth in the line from the original Ptolemy general. But finally, in 203 BC, Antiochus saw his opportunity to strike at Egypt again, since Ptolemy IV had just died and had been succeeded by his son Epiphanes, who was a mere boy of 4 years old. So the king in charge of the dynasty in the south, which is basically an infant, so he saw blood in the water. He went after it, and that's where we end in verse 12. Okay. Somebody read. Mom, can you read 14 through 19? You're on mute.
That's right, I saw. Now, in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south, and the violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. Then the king of the north will come, cast up a siege mound, and capture a well-fortified city. And the forces of the south will not stand their ground, not even their choicest troops, for there will be no strength to make a stand. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand him. He will also stay for a time in the beautiful land with destruction in his hand, and he will set his face to come with the power of his whole kingdom, bringing with him a proposal of peace, which he will put into effect. He will also give him the daughter of women to ruin it, but she will not take a stand for him or be on his side. Then he will turn his face to the coastland and capture many. But a commander will put a stop to his scorn against him. Moreover, he will repay him for his scorn. So he will turn his face toward the fortresses of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and be found no more. Then in his
All right,
place,
stop right there. Stop right there, because that's more than we can bite, right? So let me kind of explain what you just read. So after this 4-year-old raises the king, right? These verses document the eventual wrestling of the Holy Land from Ptolemy. Finally loses, the Ptolemy dynasty loses control of the Holy Land, what's called the Beautiful Land. Up to this point, when they were under the Egyptian kings, okay, under the Ptolemy dynasty, they were allowed to worship in a free way. There was no they didn't force them to change the religion or their viewpoints or their ways. The temple could still operate. They could still do the daily offerings. Everything was normal under the Egyptian Ptolemy dynasty. But when the Ptolemy dynasty became so weak, where the Seleucids saw an opportunity, they decided that they were going to take away all of Judea and Samaria and all that land away and drive all the way down to Gaza. Okay. By doing this basically set the stage for would be our first antichrist or false Messiah. It says that hoping to gain advantage over Egypt, Antiochus the Great gave his daughter Cleopatra in marriage to Ptolemy V in 195 BC. But Antiochus' daughter sided with her husband and no advantage was gained. Antiochus then lost the battle against Roman forces. So here in the middle of this, the Romans are starting to get their nose into this mess, and this complicates it because up to this point, the Romans have been quiet. They've been since the Battle of Carthage, they had been fairly quiet in the Mediterranean, and now they're starting to feel their oats and feel their power, and you're going to see that Greece is going to start losing on the northern end of their land during this period of time. After his defeat, he had to surrender his entire elephant brigade, all his navy, 20 selected hostages. Now, this is important. So in this fight, he loses 20 very important hostages, politicians. Finally, he was obliged to pay an indemnity of 15,000 or 20,000 talents over a period of 7 years. And so Antiochus' second son, who was named after him, was among the 20 hostages taken to Rome. Now, hear this out. This is important. Where he spent the formative years of his life, he later became known as Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, so does anybody know that name? So, so Antiochus Epiphanes spent the better part of his life in Rome, and he learned Roman ways and he learned Roman fighting. And the spirit of the Romans became in him. And so when we see him rise up in the next verses, in verse 20, as we rise up, we're going to see where this man's thought process comes from. It comes from that spirit, that seed of Rome. Okay. Where did we finish? Verse 19, right?
19.
yeah, I have a question. I think I heard you say it opposite than my Bible says it, because in verse 17, this wife, the daughter of women, to ruin it, but she will not take a stand for him or be on his side. So I thought you said she helped him out or something, but my Bible says she didn't take his side. So I don't
No,
understand.
basically the whole purpose of the marriage didn't work out. So the purpose of the marriage was to pacify the situation. It didn't work. She had her own ambitious gains in the whole thing. This is the first time we mentioned the name Cleopatra. Okay, this is not the Cleopatra of Mark Antony's fame. This is, but Cleopatra it would become a prominent name like Mary or Miriam is in among the Jews. Cleopatra is a common name among the Ptolemy dynasty. Okay, so you'll see in many generations their princess will be called Cleopatra, but it's not the same one of Mark Antony's fame. Okay, different Cleopatra. All right, Matt, will you read verse 20 through 28? This is the big part here.
It says, "Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. In his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for plots shall be devised against him. Even those who eat his food shall break him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. And as for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail, for the end is yet to be at the appointed time. And he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant, and he shall work his will and return to his own land."
Okay, so let's just, okay, we're talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. One of the things that's very, very common is that in each royal house, there's always treachery. We look at King David, Absalom, right? What was his other son? I mean, there's constantly within your own royal house, you saw your sons turning on fathers. You see queen mothers taking over the realm when a son dies. This constant thing that happens in these royal houses it's normal. We're seeing it on the pages right now. We have Harry, okay, not really. There's been a doubt for a long time that he's actually the son of Charles, right? There's been that he was fathered by a general, and we notice that he by deceit he married somebody who convinced him to give up his basically his birthright, right? He gives it up by deceit. A woman who sows treachery into that house. The queen basically has to kick him out. We see this in a modern newspaper going on in among a royal house that has no power, right? Imagine in a royal house that had gold, silver, and an army and all the politicians behind them, okay? This is what we're talking about here. And when they rise to power and they become strong, the first thing that many of them do is they kill all their enemies. Many times they kill their own brothers because their own brothers become their biggest enemies. This is what was happened to Ptolemy in the south. So let me just kind of read some of the notes on this. From verse 21 through 34, these verses basically document a tyrannical oppression of the Jewish people by Antiochus Epiphanes, who by force tried to make the Jewish people forego their religions and favor all things Hellen or Greek. One of the things that they would do is they would try to reverse circumcision. Have you heard this before? Now, it seems like an almost impossibility, but it just shows you the lengths that people mentally would go to forego their birthright, right? And but that didn't happen unless people within the Judean princes began to fight against each other. So in the book of Maccabees, what led to Antiochus Epiphanes really taking control of the nation was because inside the royal house in Judea, they were fighting each other. They became weak. And Antiochus saw this, and he saw the gold of the temple, and he saw everything that was available for him to take, and he went after it. At this point, the Ptolemies never sought that gold. They didn't really seek any tribute from the Judeans. But now that Antiochus has risen to power, he is so powerful that he begins to set stage for what we will now call the first anti-Messiah or false Messiah. Okay, this is the spirit that's in this man is the spirit that we'll refer to as the abomination of desolation. All right, but before we do that, let me find the verse. Give me a second. Okay. Give me just a second. Let's turn to 2 Kings chapter 21. Yeah, this is kind of a bunny trail, but let me just say something. I have watched a lot of movies, right, and shows, and there's a show I don't know if you've seen called Flash, where he goes back in time and he tries to fix something, but every time he tries to fix something, it causes another problem. Okay, so he's trying to save Flash. I'm sorry, there's just this funny trail. He tries to save his mother from dying, right? But by doing that, it creates another problem. And so then when he realizes the problem, he goes back and tries to stop what he did the first time so it could, but it never works out. Okay. So before King Manasseh of Judah is born, Hezekiah is given a death sentence, King Hezekiah. And he gets cancer, and during that time, the Assyrian army has surrounded the Jerusalem, and he begins to plead. He begins to plead to God, and then the prophet Jeremiah says that God is going to give him 15 more years, and also the Assyrians would be destroyed. So you remember this, okay? So in that process of this wonderful king who destroys all the high places in the land and establishes the appointed times, and he gets the priest and the Levites to do what they're supposed to do. Okay. In that, he gives birth to a boy named Manasseh. All right. Manasseh basically takes power over Judea and the southern kingdom when he's 12 years old. But the damage doesn't come until he's in his 20s, because let me just read here in verse 1. Now, Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. His mother was Hephzibah, but he did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, following after the abominations of the nations that Adonai had dispossessed before the children of Israel. For he rebuilt the shrines that his father Hezekiah had destroyed, and he erected the altars for Baal and made an Asherah pole as King Ahab of Israel had done. And he bowed down to all the hosts of heaven and worshiped them. He even built, let's talk about this verse 4. He even built altars in Adonai's house, in God's house, where Adonai had said, in Jerusalem, I will put my name. He built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of Adonai. So in the Azarah, the inner courtyard, and the court of women, the outer courtyard, he put basically, he built some type of statue to the Baals. He wasn't done yet. So after all of this, he also made his son, his oldest, pass through the fire. He practiced soothsaying, divination, consulted mediums, spiritists. He did so much evil in Adonai's eyes to provoke him. Okay, this guy was one bad guy. All right, why am I bringing up? because this is the first time we see an abomination of desolation put in the temple. Okay. The precedent of this, he has a spirit of a false Messiah, is in Manasseh. And the precedent starts because the people of the land, the beautiful land, they themselves become contemptible. They corrupt themselves and they allow foreign forces to come in there and do these things. So Antiochus Epiphanes was clearly evil, but let me tell you what was going on inside the land at that time was there was evil princes scheming against each other for power. And this is what opened the door for it, okay? All right, let's go back to Daniel. Now, well, actually, let's jump to let's go. I'm sorry. Let's go to Matthew chapter 24. So I want you to underline this verse in your Bible, but verse 15. So when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through the Daniel the prophet. Now, Daniel speaks of the abomination of desolation in Daniel 9:27, 11:31, and 12:11. Okay, so 3 times in Daniel speaks of this abomination of desolation. Spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place. Let the reader understand that those of Judea must flee the mountains. The one on the roof must not go down to what is in the house, and the one in the field must not turn back to get his coat. Okay. Why am I saying this? Why am I giving this here? Because you got to understand that Antiochus Epiphanes put in the first abomination of desolation, a foreign government. But it's not the first time it happened. Okay. Manasseh was the first one that did it. Now, in the future, there'll be another false Messiah who's going to do the same thing. All right. We do know that Titus and Vespasian, they put in a statue to Jupiter in there, but people were no longer worshiping and sacrificing when they did that. They were outlawed. So the difference at this point is nobody ever worships again there, and basically it became a shrine for the Romans, but it was no longer something where they stopped the worship and then it would come back. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the key to this story here. When he talks about the abomination desolation, he's referring directly to Daniel, the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, and then also in the future. So there's 2 events.
It looks like this is actually maybe referring back, but also forward, because he said in the next verse, like they are to flee. So that has to be something they're expecting in the future.
Right. That's exactly right. Now, some have mistook this to think that the Romans did it, and some of the preterists believe that the 1,260 days is 1,260 years, and they come up with some crazy nonsense stuff. But just for now, let's just keep in mind that we're talking about 2 events, one by Antiochus Epiphanes, and then a future false Messiah will do the same thing. Okay. Where did we leave off? 27 or 28? 28, right?
Oh, we finished at 28. That's right.
Okay. All right. Mom, will you read 29 through 35?
Okay, and I'm reading the New American Standard. At the appointed time he will return and come into the south. But this last time it will not turn out the way it did before. For the ships of Chap will come against him. Therefore he will be disheartened and will return and become enraged at the holy covenant and take action, so that he will come back and show regard for those who forsake holy covenant. What does it
Let me
mean
hold right there.
regard?
Before you go on, let me kind of give you your reading. The ships from Chap was the Romans were stationed in Cyprus, and they used as a launching point because they had made alliance with the high priest the high priest in the southern kingdom in Judea had called for the Romans for help. Okay. And when they called for Romans to help, this is why Antiochus Epiphanes became so enraged, because he looked at it, this was his realm and they had no right. So he became aware of the danger of the Romans because they are starting to rise to power. All right, keep going, Mom.
Okay. What does it mean? There was a question I had when I asked and then I forgot. I'll come back in a minute, I guess. Um, and the forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice. And they will set up an abomination of desolation. And by smooth words he will turn the godless, those who act wickedly, toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. Yet they will fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by plunder for many days. Now, when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in the hypocrisy. And some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the
All right,
appointed
stop right there.
time.
Yeah, stop right there at the end of 35. Okay, 35 is a transition verse. We're going to talk about that in a second. But what we see here is the people within within Israel themselves, the Israelites themselves, have fallen away big time. Now, when Ezra and Nehemiah come back and they rebuilt the temple, who were the two people, the two witnesses, the two menorahs, the two olive trees that helped rebuild the temple? Do you remember their names?
You're talking about in Revelation?
Mm-mm. I'm talking
No.
about in Zechariah,
Oh, in
the ones
Zechariah?
who rebuild the temple.
Well,
Oh, the Nehemiah and the one
Yeah.
before him. No.
it
No.
is
Yeah.
the Zerubbabel one.
Zerubbabel is one.
That's
I
who I was
didn't
trying to
know there were
think
two of them.
of.
Zerubbabel is
Ezra.
one.
Ezra. It's Ezra.
Let's
Nope.
go to Zechariah chapter 4. And I'll read this for you, verse 1. Then the angel who had been speaking with me returned and woke me like a man who is awakened from his sleep. He asked me, "What do you see?" And I replied, "I see a solid gold menorah." Some of you will have a different translation there. That's okay. "I see a solid gold menorah with this bowl on the top of it and 7 lamps on it with 7 pipes for the lamps that are on the top of it. Also, I see 2 olive trees that are by it, one on the right side of the bowls and the other is on the left side." Then I responded by saying to the angel speaking with, "What are these, my Lord?" And the angel who spoke with me responded by asking, "Do you not know what these are?" And I replied, "No, my Lord." Then he responded to me saying, "This is the word of Adonai to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might, nor by power, but by Ruach, says Adonai Sabaoth. What are you, great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain. He will bring out the capstone with shouts of grace, grace to do it." Okay. Again, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "Hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands will also finish it. And you'll know that Adonai Sabaoth has sent me to you, for he despises the day of small things. These 7, which are the eyes of Adonai that run back and forth throughout the whole earth, will rejoice when they see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hands." Then I responded by asking, "Well, what are these 2 olive trees on the right and on the left of the menorah?" And again, I asked him, "What are these 2 olive branches? Because the 2 golden pipes that are empty, the golden oil out of them." And he said to me, "Do you not know what these are?" And I said, "No, my Lord, I don't." And he says, "So these are the 2 anointed ones who are standing by the Lord of the whole earth. Okay, these are another name. The John the Apostle, who wrote the book of Revelations, would have used the same words. These are the two anointed ones in the book of Revelations. Okay, so the purpose of Zechariah, the purpose of Zerubbabel, and the purpose of, when we go into the next chapter, and we deal in, I'm sorry, is it, yeah, no, the prior chapter, excuse me. I think it's a prior chapter. Let me confirm. When we deal, this thing's slow. Okay, if you go to chapter 3, okay. And it says, we can just start, I'll just read a little bit of it. Then he showed me Joshua the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, standing before the angel of Adonai, and the Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. And Adonai said to Satan, Adonai rebukes you, and the Satan, Adonai, and then indeed Adonai, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebukes you. Is not this man a brand plucked out of the fire? Now Joshua was wearing filthy garments and standing before the angel, who answered and spoke to those before him, saying, remove these filthy garments from him. Then to Joshua he said, see, I have removed your iniquity from you, and I will dress you with fine clothing. Then I said, place a clean turban on his head. So they put the turban on his head, clothed him with garments, while the angel of Adonai stood by him. Then the angel of Adonai exhorted Joshua, saying, thus says Adonai Sabaoth, if you walk in my ways and keep my charge, then you would judge my house, that's the temple, and watch over my court, and I will give you a place to walk among these standing here. Listen well, Joshua, Kohen Gadol, high priest, both you and your companions seated before you, because they are men who are a sign. Behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch, that's the Messiah. For behold, the stones I have laid before Joshua is one stone with 7 facets, and on it I'll engrave an inscription, declares Adonai Sabaoth, that I'll remove the iniquity of this land in one day. In that day, declares Adonai Sabaoth, every man will invite his neighbor to sit under the vine and under the fig tree. Okay, so that's actually, that last verse is a foreshadowing of the future, right? Now, Joshua, Kohen Gadol, and Zerubbabel is from the line of King David. He's a prince, a politician. Joshua, Kohen Gadol, the high priest, he's from the line of Aaron. Okay, and the two of them together helped rebuild the temple. They are called the anointed ones, or the two witnesses. Their symbols are the menorah and the olive trees. Okay, so when you go forward into the book of Revelations, we see two men who basically are given the same purpose to rebuild the third temple. Okay, and when they do that, it gets desecrated. When these men did this, it would come a couple hundred years later, but it would be desecrated by Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, you see the foreshadowing of both things. One is telling us about the future, but we must have an Antiochus Epiphanes to understand who the false Messiah is in the book of Revelations. Okay, does that make sense, or clear as mud? Okay. All right, let's go back to Daniel, and we'll go into this. Okay. Now, let's take this really slow, because this is not easy. Okay. But as we read it, I want you to write down, if you have a piece of paper, some of the aspects or some of the attributes of a false Messiah.
Verse, what verse?
We're going to start in 36. Okay, and I'll read this. I'm going to go real slow. Okay. Now the king shall do as he wills. Now notice verse 35 was a transition verse between the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Verse 36 is a time in our future. Okay. So when prophets would, let me see if I get a piece of paper here. Yeah, here, let me use this. Let's say a lot of times you're going to see this when you read. I don't know if you can see this. A prophet will say, he'll give you a picture here, and right next to it in the same book, same chapter, same scroll, he'll put another picture here, and this one will deal with our time, and this one will deal with his time. Okay, so when you're reading, you're like, okay, where did this stop and this begin? Super confusing. All right, so verse 35 was a transition verse. And some of the wise shall stumble so that they may be refined, purified, and made white until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. Transition verse. You got it? Now we're talking about a false Messiah in the future. We're no longer talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay. By the way, just find this to be interesting. The names of Antiochus and the Ptolemies, many of them took on the name of Soter. It was a Greek word meaning hidden one. And it's interesting that Obama, his name, his family name that he took on was Barry Sotero or Sotero. Same name, the hidden ones. No coincidence in this world, by the way. Anyway, we're going to talk about that in a second. Verse 36. And the king, this false Messiah, shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself, magnify himself above every god, and he'll speak astonishing things against the God of gods. Some of you'll say blasphemous things, right? He shall prosper until the indignation is accomplished. For what is decreed shall be done. There you go. Remember we talked about the council in heaven a few weeks back. We talked there's the council has already decreed about this event. It's already been written, and there's not much we can do about this. It's already been decided. Verse 37, he shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers. What does that mean?
Here it says it will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. Oh, down lower.
Yeah, Lord.
No respect for the gods. It has plural here instead of God, the gods of his
Well,
father.
that's just Elohim. That's just Elohim.
He's gonna abandon the gods that his ancestors worshipped.
Yeah, so if he was, let's say, a Muslim, he'd no longer worship as a Muslim. If he was a Christian or a Catholic, he'd no longer worship as a Christian or a Catholic. Okay, that's basically what it's saying. And in a way, that's by the way, that's super important, very important. If you want to know who the false Messiah is, there's a big clue right there. All right, next verse. Or to the one beloved by women. Does anybody know what that means? Anybody study that out?
No.
So that's going to be part of everybody's homework assignment for next week, because we're going to go back and deal with this. And I have an opinion. I can't prove it, but I think that maybe mother goddess worship, like the worship of Tammuz. Okay, but I don't know for a fact, because I don't know complete context here. But if you guys can study that out and one of you come up with a hypothesis on that one.
Hey, this is the last chapter of Daniel. Oh,
no, Mom, we're in 11.
Oh,
Are you
okay.
Are you lost?
No, the page is stuck together.
All right, so this might be an important part. If he pays no attention to his worship of his grandfathers, right? And he no longer the one beloved by women. Maybe we just got our answer what he used to, out of what religion he comes from, because they may be tied in together as one. And if I'm right that that's a reference to mother goddess worship, it's very possible that he leaves Catholicism. It's possible. Very possible. Okay. Let's keep going. He shall pay no attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. What is the modern problem in the world today? Secular humanism, right? So he falls right in line with our society today. He's into himself. He's narcissistic. He cares only about himself. And this is important. Think of the people that we're dealing with who are in politics today. Give me some major narcissists that only think about themselves, who do not care about other people, but use themselves only to be magnified. Give me an example of a politician on the newspaper today.
Well, seem to remember, and it wasn't necessarily Christians or just people in general had pegged Obama as a narcissist.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. But the psychologist, it wasn't people, like the other political party, if I'm correct
Right.
in my memory.
Yeah, and one of the things he says when he would give a speech in office or outside of office, he would mention himself hundreds of times in a 5-minute speech. Paul and I used to joke about this. It'd be a big turnoff for us when we go see somebody speak and they would say, I, drive us crazy, right? And so this is a sign of a narcissist. But I was thinking of somebody else it's in our face today, and that is Vladimir Putin. Here's a complete narcissist. He is listening to nobody. He doesn't care. And if you think in what we just read, they will fight. We just read, they will fight wars, knowing they're losing, and be so desperate and do nothing to stop themselves. They have no way to get themselves out of the mess, because they know if they do stop, then their heads will be taken off. So here we got Putin on the pages of the newspaper threatening nuclear war, and nobody's there to stop him. There's no counsel in his head. He's not taking any counsel. That's a narcissist to me. Verse 38. He shall honor the God of fortress instead. Now, this is a very important verse right here, guys. He shall honor the God of fortress. That's the second verse that I want you guys to search out in your studies this week. Okay. Now, if you want to get context on the God of fortress, read about King Hadad, and when the Assyrians go in to destroy King Hadad, they pulled down his fortress. Okay. So if you want to understand a little context, that'll tell you what the God of fortress is. But let me ask you a question. What do you guys think the God of fortress is? Because this is what he really believes will work. What is the God of fortress?
Well, it ties a foreign god with him dealing with strong fortresses, and so a foreign god, I mean, I'm thinking demons or Satan or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it may be something as simple as something off the pages of the newspaper. I would say this: if we look at the 7-headed dragon from the book of Revelation, who sets up 10 kings, there's an answer there, because where is the power base coming from? Seven kings who have 10 crowns, right? So in the book of Revelations, when we're talking about, it's a governmental body, a powerful governmental body that controls everybody's life. The God of fortress, that fortress runs everybody's life. This is my opinion, right? But I think if you look at Hadad, he worshipped the God of fortress, and this was an Aramaean Syrian. And so there's a shadow of this stuff. Okay.
So is that Hadad? Hadad? Is that
Haddad? Yeah, Hadad.
Oh, Dad.
Yeah, that Hadad is actually the equivalent of the storm god or Zeus or Thor. Same god. Yeah, same. Now, keep going to verse. It says, a God of whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. Okay, now this is a key here, that he is going to pull another religion, a powerful religion, into his sphere to control through using money. Now, here's an example. I'm not saying one way or another, but when Obama sent pallets of billions of dollars to Iran, literally like $200 billion on pallets, non-sequential money, sends it to them. That's giving gold and silver to a god that's not his own, right? That's Muslims, Shia Muslim, not his religion. He gives them, he's buying favor. Why would he do that? Makes no sense to many of us why he did that. But there's a perfect example. The spirit behind what makes him do that, he's trying to buy their alliance. He's to try to buy their power, who they are. So keep that in mind when
he bow down before him.
Yeah, he bowed down to the what's the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, or the king Saud. I can't remember.
That's okay.
And then he also bowed to the emperor of Japan, which is ironically, he did the same thing, who was considered the sun god, in the ancient times under Shinto. So
to Barack Obama.
Well, you see him, yeah, he bowed down to both of those.
Yeah. Interesting.
Trust me, you want to know all about the spirit of the false Messiah? It was on full display for basically 8 years. He epitomized the false Messiah. I'm not saying he is or isn't. I'm just saying it was on display. Okay, his characteristics, his attributes, the description of him, the personality, the way he acted, you find in verse 36 through 39. A lot of those attributes. Okay, not saying he is. Kind of think he is, but let's leave it at that. Verse 39. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. So there answers your question. He destroys other countries with the help of the people he just bought off with gold and silver. Okay. And those who acknowledge him shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many and shall divide the land for a price. Now, you got 7 kings who set up 10 crowns, right? He divides up lands. He creates kingdoms. Okay. So in the book of Revelations, when it's talking about this guy, take verse 39, and you can see some of the reasons when he sets up his government, what he does, how he goes about getting it set up. Now, the most important thing is, what does he do there? He shall divide the land for a price. What land, Paul? What land is he going to divide up?
I would say he's Israel, but I don't know. I mean, that's the one that big fights over.
What'd you say, Paul?
I don't know. I can't say.
So what has Israel been doing since 1948 after they took the land?
Giving away their land.
They're giving away the land. Once they took it, they gave it away. So one of the things that we've seen in other places where there has to be a peace treaty that goes in place, what are the Palestinians screaming for? Their own land. It's never going to end. It's never going to stop. They're always going to want more and more and more. But if he can go and divide up the land that's not his, he's making himself like God, because only God can give the land or take it away or sell it or lease it or rent it or whatever, right? Only God can do that. But this false Messiah is going to give away the land. This is a really important aspect of what we see in the future. All right, let's go to verse 40. Matt, will you read verse 40 through the end?
Verse 40, it says, "At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen and with many ships. And he shall come into countries and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand, Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch."
Let's stop right there. Let's break this. There's a lot to consume there. Let's break that out. All right. We're the first time, Matt, we see the king in the north and the king of south being reintroduced into the conversation. Okay.
Would this be the same king of north and south that we saw at the beginning of the chapter? Because that was Egypt and Syria. Will this be different?
I believe that the king of the north is epitomized by I could be wrong. This is very, very difficult to try to figure out what's going to happen in the future. Okay. But as Matt just read, at the time of the end, so we know that in time, the king of the south shall attack him. Who's him? The king of the north. Okay. So the king of the north must be this false Messiah. Okay. It has to be the false Messiah.
That would relate to the Gog and Magog that says in Revelations or where and Zechariah too.
Yeah, Ezekiel
On God.
37, 38, 39. Yes. So something's going to provoke this seven-headed dragon from the south. So it could be Egypt, but we're going to get our answer here. It could be Egypt. It could be Saudi Arabia. It could be Yemen. Okay. It could be Libya. It could be Iraq, which my gut says is probably going to be Iraq. But these kings of the south, these Muslim nations, are going to provoke him. Okay. Now, when they provoke him, Jordan, it says Edom and Moab and shall be delivered out of his hands. So which means that Jordan and Iraq are not going to fall under his thumb. All right, see that? Jordan and Iraq are not going to fall under his control. They will be spared from his vengeance. Now go ahead, read verse 42 again. Matt.
42, it says, he shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape.
All right, so we know, let's take that and let's go to Isaiah 19. All right, let's start in verse 15 and just read a little bit, but just keep in mind when you read this and you go back and read Isaiah 19 that what is getting ready. We saw just a glimpse of what was happening in Egypt during the Obama administration when there was one Egyptian against Egyptian against Egyptian against Egyptian. We saw that taking place 7-8 years ago, right? And now it's been quiet and peaceful, and that spirit, whatever spirit stirred Egypt up, has gone quiet, but it's going to come back in the same way. So if we read verse 15, there will be no work for Egypt to do, for head or tail, palm branch or rush. In other words, there's going to be unemployment rampant. And that day, Egypt will be like women trembling with fear because of the shaking hand of Adonai Sabaoth, which he's about to wave over it. The land of Judah will terrify Egypt. Anyone who mentions it will be afraid because what Adonai Sabaoth has surely proposed against it. In that day, 5 cities in the land of Egypt will speak the language of Canaan, which is Hebrew, swearing allegiance to the Adonai Sabaoth, one used to be called by the city of the sun. Okay. In that day, there will be an altar of Adonai in the middle of the land of Egypt, and the next to the border, the pillar to Adonai. It will be as a sign, as a witness to Adonai Sabaoth in the land of Egypt, for they will cry to Adonai because of ulcers. He will send them a savior and a defender, and he will deliver them. So Adonai will make himself known to Egypt, and the Egyptians will know Adonai in that day. They will worship with sacrifices and offerings. They'll vow to Adonai and fulfill it. So Adonai will strike Egypt, striking yet healing, so they will return to Adonai, and he will respond to them and heal them. So he's going to use the Antichrist to basically wreak havoc on Egypt, and they're going to cry out. Okay. Pretty powerful as when you start connecting these things together, you read this and you go, okay, there it is over in Isaiah 19. He's talking about this event, what's going to happen. Okay. All right, keep going. Let's read.
So Rob, because he's talking about, verse 40, it talks about this is, the vision's transition to this time of the end. And then here, so this Isaiah 19, I guess this is what's occurring in the tribulation. Is that
yes.
I guess maybe the first part of the.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's interesting, just the level of detail that's being told.
Yeah.
you know.
And so here's two things that have to happen. Two nations have to rise back into not their former glory, but into preeminence during the millennial reign. Egypt and Assyria. Now, the name of Assyria has been blotted out because they caused the 10 tribes to go into idolatry, right? And he used them, but yet they sinned. He sent a prophet, but yet they went back. So that's why God has wiped out the name of Assyria. But Scripture tells us that in the end of the age, during the millennial reign, he's got to bring back these two pillars, because these two pillars are the ones that are going to, police the nation. They're going to be responsible for getting everybody to come and worship at the Feast of Tabernacles. So he's going to bring revival to the Assyrian people and to the Egyptian people. Revival's coming to them, not in the way that we see it, or the Welsh revival, or the Scottish revival, not in the way that is. There's going to be a revival like Nineveh had. Okay, that's the difference. It's going to be a Nineveh revival, not like we have seen in the Western world. Okay, it's going to be a different way. All right, go ahead and read verse 43.
43, it says, he shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver and of all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow in his train. Should I keep going? But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction.
Okay,
and he
stop
shall...
right there. Stop right there. Who's coming from the east? Who's a reference to the east?
East. Is he talking about that big army from Revelation, that 200 million?
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to see this. This is actually a reference to, remember a few weeks ago, I told you to read about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Mhm.
Did you have a chance to look at that?
I did. It looked like if once, I think it was Turkey that's applying to join, what I noticed is that there'd be 10 members.
Yeah, I know.
Which
Isn't that
is
crazy?
very interesting. Yeah, it is. It
So
is.
this is what's going to alarm this person. So let's keep going. Keep going. I just thought I'd bring that up.
So verse 45, and he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him.
Okay. So let's go back to Antiochus Epiphanes. One of the things I asked you to do when you read the book of Maccabees, what weakened Antiochus Epiphanes?
When he tried to destroy the Holy Land, I think. I'm not sure.
Well, the Maccabean revolt happened because something in specifically in Babylon, which is part of the Seleucid Empire, they revolted against him. They rebelled, and so some revolt again. So he sent his army from Antioch to Babylon, and from what I understand, he was basically wounded, and in that wound, that's when the Maccabees revolted, when he's out there marching against Babylon. His army is split, right? Maccabees revolt. He has generals that are trying to put down the revolt, and it's getting out of hand, getting out of hand. And finally, they retake Jerusalem, right? Well, as he sees Jerusalem being retaken, he comes back. He's weakened. He's lost that army. Most of that army's been really weak. It's been destroyed in that fight, a civil war, if you will. And he's wounded, and he eventually dies before he comes back into the land. Okay. Now, this is really interesting because if I read Joel chapter 2, right, I know that when they put the abomination of desolation in and they stop the daily offerings, right? Then in Joel chapter 2, when they're when they're doing their offerings, and the Lord and the Lord of hosts, when Yeshua returns in chapter 2:15, if let's just go read it real quick, and then you'll get my point. Let's just go to Joel chapter 2.
Joel?
Joel chapter 2. So, Matt, you just read, and he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end with none to help. So we know that he sets up a government force in Jerusalem. That's fairly straightforward in what it says there. But when I go to Joel chapter 2, I see a problem, because as soon as I read there, it says, blow the shofar in Zion, sound alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the living of the land tremble, for the day of Adonai is coming. Surely it is near, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. As blackness spreads over the mountains, a great and mighty people from antiquity, there was never anything like this, nor after it or ever again from generation to generation. A fire devours before them, and behind them a flame blazes up. Now here's the interesting part I want you to read here. Like the Garden of Eden is the land before them. That's the beautiful land. That's Israel. And behind them, a desolate wilderness. Jordan, Syria, Iraq is a wilderness, right? It's desolate. Okay. That's behind him. And he's got the beautiful land. This army's coming toward it, right? So if the Antichrist, the false Messiah, is camped out, something made him leave. Okay, let me say that one more time. If he has set up his capital in Jerusalem, he's stopped the daily offerings, he's in control of the land, he's parceled it out, right? But now his army is heading toward Jerusalem. Why is he not in Jerusalem at the day of the Lord? Something made him leave. You follow me? Antiochus Epiphanes was distracted by something that happened in Babylon. He took his army to fight and destroy Babylon. Okay. So let's see if we can put this together. Okay. Let's go to, just briefly, go to Isaiah, go to Isaiah 63. Now, we just read that the Antichrist, the false Messiah, does not gain control of Edom. Is that correct? We read that just now. Okay?
Yeah.
Now it says, who is this who comes from Edom with dyed garments from Basra, the one who is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength? I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is your apparel red, and why is your garments like the one who treads in the winepress? He says, I have treaded in the winepress alone for the peoples. No one's with me, for I have trodden them in my anger and trampled them in my fury. Their blood is sprinkled upon my garments. I have stained all my robes. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of redeemed Jubilee has come. I looked, but there was no one to help, and I wondered that there was no one to uphold. Therefore, my own brought salvation for me, and my own fury and sustained me. I have trodden down the people in my anger, made them drunk in my fury. Okay. Now, let's go into the book of Revelations. Let's go real quick in Revelations, the destruction of Babylon. What do you remember? Is that 19 or 18? Do you remember?
It's 18 and 19. There's two
Is it?
Babylons.
Yeah, I think it's 18.
Okay, so let's go to Revelations 18.
That's the commercial Babylon.
Yeah. So we see here that after these things, I saw an angel coming from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory, and he cried mightily with a loud voice, Babylon the great is fallen. Well, Babylon will always be physically Iraq. That'd always be it, okay? So we know Isaiah 63 says Iraq has to be destroyed. This is telling us that Babylon has to be destroyed, okay? Antiochus Epiphanes went to Babylon. Something got him his attention to make him go to Babylon. He was a He was a type and shadow of the false prophet.
East.
Yes.
He went east.
That's, you see this? These are shadows. These are telling us little details, telling us about the future. So something distracts him to make him get out, take his army and get out, right? He's got to go deal with them. And when he's out, the IDF gets back in control of the land. When the IDF gets back in control of the land, then once Babylon is destroyed, okay, Edom is destroyed, then he's going to come back and deal with Jerusalem. But he has to be pulled away for a reason. Does that make sense?
Do you think, Robert, I think at the end, the little horn comes out of three horns. And here it says, you have the Antichrist, but the two that weren't conquered by him were the sons of Ammon, which is Moab and Ammon. But I mean, they were supposed to be partners. Do you think it could be that they rebelled against him or were trying to stir up while he was here, get people away, something like that?
I don't know. I don't know why he's not able to deal with Jordan, Iraq, and here in chapter 11. I'm not really sure why he's not able to put them down. For some reason, maybe his forces are divided because he's taken Egypt and Libya and northern Africa. He's basically controlling, right? Because that's the king of the south. So keep in mind, if you keep in context with Ptolemy being of Egypt, right? The king of the south, and Seleucid being the king of the north, if the Antichrist has to go down and he destroys and attacks and conquers Egypt, the king of the north finally, after all these back and forth, he's finally able to dominate Egypt. The king in the north dominates. Now, there's been shadows of this for many, many times, but this is his final major campaign is against Egypt, which allows him to get into the land of Israel. Okay. Now, a lot of this is very confusing, right? A lot of confusing. You have to be patient and read this multiple times. And I'm going to send out my spreadsheet that I got to you. I'll send it out so you can. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It goes verse by verse. Okay. Now, what's that?
I said that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So since we have a lot of people not on, we're going to skip next week. I want to get through all of the verses, but in 2 weeks, I want to everybody that's on the phone, and Lori, I don't know if you can hear this. Everybody, I want you to write down and have prepared verses and attributes of the false Messiah. Okay. Go into 2 Thessalonians, go into the book of Revelations, look at here in Daniel. I want you to look throughout all scripture and look at these attributes and try to get a picture of what this person is going to look like. And then we're going to go over that next time.
I had written there in Daniel, that section alone, there were 17 listed.
17 attributes?
Excuse me, 14. Described him with 14 in that section, at least in my translation.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, there's I think there's just like everyone will know who the Messiah is when he comes. I don't think we're going to have a problem identifying who this false Messiah is. Okay. Any questions? Anything or any confusions that we?
The question, Robert, you asked me was what were the two nations that were going to be separated? Or I didn't get the question, but did you ask something about the two nations?
What were we reading? What verse?
Unfortunately, I did not write it down.
I think he's talking about Moab and the sons of Ammon. They were separated. They weren't conquered by the Antichrist. Am I reading that right?
That's correct. That's what I think. That's in verse 41.
41. Okay.
So why did Ammon get their name back, but Moab did not? There's a reason why certain names never come back. God knows who they are.
Mhm.
Why was Ammon allowed, but Moab not?
Well, they called Ammon Edom. Is that what you're saying? Rather than calling.
No. Ammon and Moab were the sons of Lot, right?
Okay.
Okay, so in modern day, today, the capital of Jordan is
Oh.
Ammon, right? We have Ammonites. But the name Moab has been wiped off the face of the earth like Assyria. It no longer exists. There's not even a thread of information, but yet God and Daniel knows who they are. God knows who they are, but we don't really know specifically who they are. So Edom's, their name was blotted out, but clearly we know kind of there's some shadows of who they are in modern times, which scripture kind of tells us. Psalms 137 tells us exactly who. Have I read this with you yet? Go to Psalms 137. It tells you exactly who Edom is. This is a great Messianic song. So by the rivers of Babylon, we sat down and wept. When we remembered Sion, on the willows there we hung up our harps. For there our captors demanded songs, and our tormentors asked for joy. Sing to us one of the songs of Zion. And the question is, how can we sing a song about Yehovah Adonai in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right ear wither. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I cease to remember you. If I do not set Jerusalem above my chief joy. Verse 7. Here it goes. Remember Adonai, the children of Edom. What they said on the day Jerusalem fell. The Babylonians destroyed the city, right? Strip her to her very foundations. O daughter of Babylon, the devastated one, happy is the one who repays you as you have paid us. Happy is the one who seizes your little ones and dashes them upon the rock. So here we go. We got the children of Edom being called who? Verse 8.
Edomites.
Daughters of Babylon.
There you go. Now you know who it is. So scripture tells us who Esau is going to be in the end times. But Moab has been wiped out, basically. They're not given we're not giving any information about where they are. They're probably still close to Ammon, but God has decided not to let you know who they are. And by losing your identity in scripture, when you lose your identity, what is that from an honor shame perspective? What does that mean?
Shame.
Yeah, it's a complete. If you lose your identity, it's if you get blotted out of the book of life. Okay, if your name is blotted, if your inheritance, if your ancestors have been blotted out, right? Then what? This is why you understand the kinsman redeemer is so important, because it keeps your name alive. But if you don't have a kinsman redeemer, then you lose your name, and it's being blotted out. So that's why it's important that the name is survives. If Moab's name is being blotted out, what is God saying about them?
Not happy with them.
Yeah. So
Rejecting.
why do you think? Why was Moab treated this worse than Ammon?
I think somewhere it says that when Israel needed help, they were brothers, but they didn't come to give them help. Or the other time was when they wouldn't let them go through their land when they were coming into the land of Canaan.
That was part of it. But the other one, the biggest one, was Molech. It's tied to Molech. The Moabites brought Molech into Jerusalem. Chemosh wasn't worshipped in it, but they did set the shrine of Chemosh, which is the Ammonites' version. But Moabites brought in Molech into the land, and that's why I think they were blotted out. So a lot of these things, idolatry is tied. We had this question. I mean, Joe's not on it, but he had this question a while back about why was Ephraim and Dan not in the 144,000? Because those two tribes brought in idolatry into the nation. So that's one of the main reasons why somebody's blotted out. Okay. Any questions, or we stop right there? Let's go ahead and stop the recording.